The Eternal Dominion. The grand amphitheater of Corvaxis stretched across 3 continents, its crystalline walls reaching toward the crimson sky, like the ribs of some ancient beast. Today marked the 50,000th anniversary of the Great Submission, when every species in the known galaxy would renew their eternal pledge of servitude to the Zephyrian Empire. Supreme Overlord HFY materialized at the center of the amphitheater, his form a shifting mass of pure energy contained within a vaguely humanoid shell. His presence alone caused the atmosphere to vibrate with power, sending ripples through the assembled billions. Around him, the other Zephyrian lords took their positions, each one a being of terrifying beauty and unimaginable might. The ceremony began as it had for millennia. One by one, representatives of 1,000 species approached the central dais. The proud Thoraxians, with their chitinous exoskeletons and razor-sharp claws, prostrated themselves completely. The ethereal lumini, beams of living light from the Andromeda sector, dimmed their radiance in submission. Even the fierce Kragan warriors, who had once conquered entire star systems, bent their massive forms and touched their foreheads to the crystalline floor. Each species spoke the same words, translated into their native tongues, but carrying identical meaning. We are nothing before the eternal glory of the Zephyrian Empire. Our lives, our worlds, our very existence belongs to you. We submit absolutely and without question. HFY absorbed their devotion like a star drinks stellar matter, his energy form growing brighter with each pledge. This was the natural order that had brought peace to the galaxy for 50,000 years. The Zephyrians were gods among mortals, and mortals knew their place. But today, something was different. A new ship had appeared at the edge of the system just hours before the ceremony. It was crude by galactic standards, built from metal and ceramic, rather than the flowing biomaterials or energy matrices favored by advanced civilizations. The vessel bore no marks of submission, no prayers carved into its hull, no offerings trailing from its engines. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, humanity's first interstellar vessel. She was a woman forged in Earth's brutal wars, her dark eyes holding the kind of steel that came from watching civilization nearly collapse and choosing to build it back stronger. The bridge around her hummed with nervous energy as her crew prepared for what might be humanity's first and last act on the galactic stage. Captain, Lieutenant Commander Jackson reported from the sensor station, his voice tight with controlled fear. The energy readings from that planet are off the charts. Whatever's down there could vaporize our entire fleet without breaking a sweat. Elena nodded grimly. They had known this mission was likely a one-way trip. Earth's long-range telescopes had detected signs of a vast galactic civilization, one apparently ruled by beings of godlike power. But humanity had made its choice. They would not go quietly into the night, and they would not kneel to anyone. Dr. Martinez, Elena called to the ship's chief scientist. What's your assessment of their technology? Dr. Sofia Martinez looked up from her instruments, her weathered face creased with concentration. She had spent her life studying impossible physics, preparing humanity for this moment. Captain, they're manipulating fundamental forces at a level we can barely comprehend. They're literally reshaping matter and energy at will. But, she paused, her eyes narrowing. There's something strange about the patterns. They're incredibly powerful, but also incredibly rigid. Like they'd been using the same methods for so long they've forgotten there might be other ways. A communication burst erupted from the planet's surface, the signal so powerful it momentarily overloaded their receivers. When the static cleared, a voice spoke in perfect English, though the words carried harmonics that made the ship's hull resonate. Unknown vessel, you have entered sacred space during the Great Submission. Identify yourselves and prepare to receive divine instruction. Elena stepped forward to the communications console. Her voice was calm, but every person on the bridge could hear the defiance underlying her words. This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Earth ship Defiance. We come in peace, but we bow to no one. The silence that followed lasted exactly 17 seconds. Elena knew because she counted everyone. When the voice returned, it carried a note of something that might have been confusion. Unknown species, you will dock with our ceremonial platform and present yourselves for education in proper galactic order. Failure to comply will result in your immediate destruction. Elena looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. They were afraid, but they were ready. Humanity had sent its best, and its best would not disappoint. "Very well," she said. "We accept your invitation." The docking procedure was unlike anything they had experienced. Streams of energy enveloped their ship and guided it through what appeared to be solid matter. The docking bay they entered defied physics as they understood it, larger inside than outside, with walls that shifted like living things. As the human delegation prepared to disembark, Elena made final checks on the equipment they carried. Humanity's greatest scientific achievements were contained in devices no larger than briefcases, designed to demonstrate their capabilities without appearing overtly threatening. The plan was simple: show strength, maintain dignity, and never, ever kneel. The airlock opened onto a scene from a fever dream. The air itself glowed with phosphorescent energy, and the deck beneath their feet felt solid yet somehow alive. Waiting for them was a delegation of Zephyrians, their forms shifting between states of matter as they moved. HFY stood at their center, his presence so overwhelming that several humans unconsciously took a step back. Around the docking bay, representatives of dozens of species immediately fell to their knees at his approach. Some pressed their faces to the deck, others began chanting prayers in languages that hurt to hear. "Welcome, children of Earth," HFY said, his voice carrying harmonics designed to inspire awe and immediate submission. "You stand before the eternal Zephyrian Empire, rulers of this galaxy for 50,000 years. It is customary for new species to show proper reverence upon first contact." The humans remained standing. Elena stepped forward, her military bearing evident in every line of her posture. "Supreme Overlord, we are honored to meet you. We come as representatives of humanity, seeking to understand your civilization and hoping you will take time to understand ours." The temperature in the bay seemed to drop several degrees. The kneeling aliens looked up in horror at the humans' failure to prostrate themselves. Even some of the Zephyrians seemed taken aback by this unprecedented breach of protocol. "You do not kneel," HFY observed, his voice carrying a dangerous edge that made the air itself vibrate. "We mean no disrespect," Elena replied, her voice steady as granite. "But humans stand as equals. We offer friendship and cooperation, not worship." The word "equals" sent shockwaves through the assembled crowd. Several of the prostrate aliens began making sounds that might have been prayers or might have been the noise creatures make when they're too terrified to think clearly. HFY's form flared brighter, energy crackling around him like controlled lightning. "Equals. Child, your species has barely crawled from its birth world. We were ancient when your star was young. We have guided 1,000 civilizations to their proper place in the cosmic order. We are gods, not merely in name, but in truth." Dr. Martinez stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear. "With respect, Supreme Overlord, we've learned that the universe is vast and full of wonders. Perhaps there are things we might learn from each other." HFY gestured, and the air around the humans shimmered. Suddenly, they found themselves surrounded by holographic displays showing the scope of Zephyrian power. Planets danced in their orbits at the Empire's command. Stars themselves were moved like chess pieces across the cosmic board. Entire civilizations rose and fell at the Zephyrians' whim. "Behold the power of the Zephyrian Empire," HFY declared. "We control forces beyond your primitive comprehension. Your crude technology is less than nothing before our might." But instead of being intimidated, Dr. Martinez studied the displays with scientific fascination. "Remarkable," she murmured. "Your mastery of large-scale energy manipulation is extraordinary. But I'm curious about the underlying principles. How do you maintain quantum coherence across such massive scales without introducing cascade errors?" The question caught Cathfar completely off guard. In 50,000 years, no species had ever responded to demonstrations of Zephyrian power with technical curiosity. They'd bowed in awe, or folded in terror, or collapsed in worship. They never asked about quantum mechanics. "Your questions are irrelevant," Cathfar said after a pause that lasted just long enough to be noticeable. "Mortals need not understand the methods of gods." Elena and Martinez exchanged glances. Martinez reached into her equipment pack and withdrew a device no larger than her palm. "Perhaps we might share something of our own achievements," she said politely. The device hummed to life, and suddenly the impossible architecture of the docking bay made sense to the humans. Martinez had activated humanity's first successful reality anchor, a device that created a localized field of stable spacetime. Within its range, the humans could see the true structure of the bay. It was magnificent, but it was technology, not magic. More importantly, the Zephyrians could see that the humans were no longer awed by their environmental manipulations. The psychological impact of their overwhelming displays was being neutralized by human engineering. One of the younger Zephyrians, Vexthai, moved closer, his energy form pulsing with excitement. "What is this device? How does it function?" Before Cathfar could silence him, Dr. Martinez was explaining the principles of quantum field stabilization, speaking with the enthusiasm of a scientist sharing a breakthrough with a colleague. Vexthai listened with rapt attention, asking technical questions that demonstrated a deep understanding of physics. This was not how first contact was supposed to proceed. The Zephyrians had perfected the art of overwhelming lesser species into immediate submission. But these humans seemed immune to intimidation, responding to displays of power with curiosity rather than fear. Cathfar's form darkened, energy patterns shifting into configurations that suggested barely contained violence. "Enough," he said, his voice making the crystalline walls of the bay ring like struck bells. "You will submit, or you will be made to submit. There is no third option." Elena stepped protectively in front of her team, her hand resting on a device at her belt. "Supreme Overlord, we came here hoping for peaceful dialogue. But if you insist on treating us as enemies, you'll find that humans don't submit easily. Then you will learn why 1,000 species kneel before us," Cathfar said. The bay filled with blinding light as every Zephyrian present channeled their power simultaneously. Energy beams that could vaporize asteroids converged on the human delegation. The prostrate aliens screamed and covered their eyes, certain they were about to witness the complete annihilation of these impossibly arrogant newcomers. But when the light faded, the humans still stood. Martinez's reality anchor had expanded into a full defensive matrix, its field generators working at maximum capacity to deflect the attack. The humans looked shaken but unharmed, their equipment smoking but functional. "Impressive," Elena said, her voice slightly hoarse from the energy discharge. "Our turn." The shattered throne. The silence that followed Elena's words stretched across the docking bay like a held breath. For the first time in 50,000 years, the Zephyrians had encountered beings who could withstand their power. The prostrate aliens slowly lifted their heads, unable to believe what they were witnessing. Cathfar's energy form writhed with patterns of confusion and rage. "Impossible," he whispered, then roared, "Impossible. No mortal technology can deflect our divine power." "Apparently it can," Elena replied calmly, though her heart was hammering against her ribs. "The question is, what happens now?" Before Cathfar could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the ceremonial platform. In the space above Corvaxes, reality itself seemed to tear open as dozens of human ships materialized from hyperspace. They were larger than the Defiance, their hulls bristling with weapons that looked nothing like the elegant energy projectors favored by galactic civilizations. Admiral Marcus Thane's voice crackled through the communication systems, reaching every corner of the amphitheater. "This is Admiral Thane of the United Earth Fleet. Captain Vasquez, report your status." Elena touched her communicator. "We're alive, Admiral, but I think we've overstayed our welcome." "Copy that, Captain." We're reading massive energy buildups throughout the system. Recommend immediate extraction. Kethvar's form blazed with fury. You dare bring weapons into sacred space. Your arrogance knows no bounds. He gestured, and every Zephyrian ship in the system began powering up weapon systems that could crack planets. But Admiral Thane had not come unprepared. All ships, activate quantum disruptors on my mark. Across the human fleet, devices that represented humanity's greatest scientific breakthrough hummed to life. The quantum disruptors were born from decades of theoretical physics and desperate necessity. They created fields that disrupted the fundamental energy patterns that Zephyrian technology relied upon. The effect was immediate and devastating to the Zephyrian fleet. Their energy-based systems began to flicker and fail. Ships that had ruled the galaxy for millennia suddenly found themselves powerless, drifting in space like abandoned hulks. In the docking bay, Kethvar staggered as his own form began to destabilize. What have you done? Dr. Martinez stepped forward, her scientific excitement overriding her fear. We've discovered something interesting about your technology, Supreme Overlord. It's incredibly advanced, but it's also incredibly dependent on maintaining specific quantum states. Disrupt those states, and she gestured, and Kethvar's carefully maintained energy matrix flickered like a candle in the wind. For just a moment, the assembled beings saw something impossible. A Zephyrian reduced to his base form, no longer the godlike entity they worshipped, but a creature of flesh and bone, ancient beyond measure but still fundamentally mortal. The revelation sent shockwaves through every species present. The Thoraxian's mandibles clicked in confusion. The Lumini's light patterns shifted into spectrums that indicated deep distress. Even the mighty Kragan warriors looked up from their prostrate positions with something approaching hope in their eyes. Vexthai, the young Zephyrian who had shown curiosity about human technology, spoke with a voice that held none of his elders' arrogance. How long have you known? Elena looked around the bay at the hundreds of species that had spent millennia in enforced submission. We suspected from the moment we arrived. Your technology is impressive, but it follows patterns. Patterns can be analyzed, understood, and eventually countered. But more than that, Martines added, her voice growing stronger, we learned something about ourselves that you never understood. Humans don't just adapt to challenges. We adapt challenges to us. Kethvar's form solidified as he regained control, but the damage was done. Every being in the amphitheater had seen him vulnerable, had witnessed the impossible sight of a god brought low by mortal science. This changes nothing, he snarled, though his voice lacked its previous absolute authority. We have ruled this galaxy for 50,000 years. One species with clever tricks cannot overturn the cosmic order. Watch us, Elena said. The battle that followed would be remembered in 1,000 languages across 1,000,000 worlds. The Zephyrians threw everything they had at the human fleet. Energy weapons that could vaporize moons, gravitational manipulators that could crush fleets like tin cans, and reality warping devices that turned space itself into a weapon. But for every display of godlike power, humanity had an answer. Their ships scattered like insects, too small and too fast for the massive Zephyrian weapons to track effectively. Where Zephyrian beams struck empty space, human missiles appeared from unexpected angles, their warheads designed specifically to disrupt energy-based defenses. Admiral Thane commanded the battle from the bridge of the UES Endeavour, his weathered hand steady on the tactical displays. He had fought in Earth's resource wars, had seen humanity at its lowest point, and had helped build it back up. He knew that sometimes the only way to deal with a bully was to hit them in the mouth. All ships, focus fire on their command vessels, he ordered. Let's see how godlike they feel when they can't coordinate their attacks. The human fleet moved with a coordination that bewildered their enemies. Each ship was small and seemingly insignificant compared to the massive Zephyrian vessels, but they worked together like cells in a single organism. When Zephyrian ships tried to isolate and destroy individual human vessels, they found themselves facing concentrated fire from dozens of directions. In the amphitheater, the carefully orchestrated ceremony had dissolved into chaos. Species that had knelt in submission for millennia were rising to their feet, looking at their Zephyrian overlords with new eyes. The Kragan warriors were the first to act, their massive forms straightening as they remembered what it felt like to stand proud. "Brothers," rumbled Chieftain Gorak, his voice carrying across the amphitheater, "we are Kragan. We bow to no one." The cry was taken up by others. The Thraxians clicked their approval in rhythmic patterns that spoke of defiance. The Lumini began to pulse with colors that hadn't been seen in the galaxy for 50,000 years, the colors of rebellion. Kithfar found himself facing not just the human delegation, but a growing crowd of species that were remembering what freedom felt like. "You fools," he raged. "Without our guidance, you will destroy yourselves. We brought peace to the galaxy. You brought submission." Elena replied, "There's a difference." The tide of the battle above was turning. Human quantum disruptors were creating dead zones throughout the Zephyrian fleet, areas where their energy-based technology simply couldn't function. Zephyrian ships found themselves reduced to using crude ballistic weapons, systems they hadn't needed for millennia, and had almost forgotten how to operate. But the humans had never forgotten the value of a good old-fashioned kinetic weapon. Railgun projectiles moving at significant fractions of light speed punched through Zephyrian shields like they were tissue paper. Vexthai approached Elena, his form flickering between states of matter as his control wavered. "Your species," he said quietly. "You're not like the others, are you?" Elena looked at him thoughtfully. Of all the Zephyrians, this one seemed genuinely curious rather than simply arrogant. "No," she said. "We're not. We're stubborn, and we're curious, and we don't like being told we can't do something, even when the something is impossible. Especially then." The young Zephyrian's form solidified into something almost humanoid, though still crackling with residual energy. "My people have been gods for so long, we forgot what it was like to grow, to change, to be challenged. Perhaps this is what we needed." The battle above reached its climax as Admiral Thane's flagship engaged Kethfar's personal dreadnought, a vessel the size of a small moon that had served as the flagship of the Zephyrian fleet for 10,000 years. The human ship was dwarfed by its opponent, but it carried something the dreadnought didn't: the concentrated fury of a species that refused to kneel. "All weapons, full power," Thane ordered. "Let's make history." The Endeavor's main gun, a device that accelerated particles to near-light speed through a series of quantum field manipulators, fired directly into the dreadnought's primary reactor. The result was visible from the planet's surface as a new star briefly appeared in the sky. When the light faded, Kethfar's flagship was a drifting hulk, its godlike weapons silent forever. In the amphitheater, Kethfar fell to his knees, his energy form finally failing completely. Around him, his fellow Zephyrians flickered and faded as their connection to their power sources was severed. For the first time in 50,000 years, they appeared as they truly were, ancient, tired beings who had hidden behind their technology. For so long they had forgotten how to exist without it. Elena knelt beside Kethfar, not in submission, but in something approaching compassion. "It doesn't have to end here," she said quietly. "You can choose to be part of what comes next, instead of clinging to what came before." The former Supreme Overlord looked up at her with eyes that held millennia of weariness. "What comes next?" Elena stood and looked around the amphitheater at the hundreds of species that were taking their first free breaths in 50,000 years. "We figure it out together," she said. "All of us." The revolution that followed was not violent, though it was swift. Across the galaxy, species that had been held in subjugation for millennia threw off their chains. The Zephyrian Empire crumbled not through conquest, but through the simple realization that gods only have power over those who choose to worship them. Humanity found itself in the unexpected position of liberators, though they quickly made it clear they had no interest in replacing one empire with another. Instead, they proposed something radical: a galactic confederation, where each species had an equal voice, where decisions were made through cooperation rather than domination. It wasn't perfect. There were conflicts, disagreements, and growing pains that lasted for generations. But it was something new, something that the galaxy had never seen before. A civilization built on the principle that no one species, no matter how powerful, had the right to rule over others. Years later, as Elena Vasquez stood on the observation deck of Unity Station, the Confederation's capital, she watched ships from 100 different species dock peacefully at the same platform. Former enemies worked side by side. Former slaves stood as equals with their former masters, and the galaxy continued its ancient dance around the stars, but now to a rhythm of freedom rather than submission. Dr. Martinez joined her at the viewport, now considerably older but no less curious about the universe around them. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we had knelt?" she asked. Elena smiled, thinking of all the species that were now free to choose their own destinies. "Every day," she said. "But then I remember that humans don't kneel. We stand up, we ask questions, and we change the universe one impossible thing at a time." Above them, the stars shone with the light of 1,000 free worlds, and the galaxy had never been more beautiful.